I'm excited to present to everyone today how to take your content strategy to the next level by making efficient and scalable content. I have a few things I want to cover, going over creating a targeted but expansive content strategy, really diving into how to make the strategy, as well as something that's very topically relevant. It's getting a lot of buzz in most of your podcasts and webinars that you've been seeing in the last couple of months, how to leverage AI generated content to drive impact and free up resources, making a more efficient strategy for you and your team, but also the secrets of getting that informational content to convert. Because you care more about the conversions than you do the traffic, we have to make sure we're leveraging these articles towards our bottom business KPIs. Let's start with strategy. The big thing with strategy is content is king. You've heard this a million times. Everyone keeps saying it. They don't really tell you why content is king or how to make content king of your digital campaign. We're also forgetting to put it's more strategic content is king. A messy strategy will hold you back. If you don't have a well laid out plan, you're wasting resources, it's costly, and also it's confusing Google on the aboutness of your entity or your brand or your website. And that's the big problem. Because when Google gets confused about what your site and your brand is about, it's hard for Google to rank you. It's hard for it to see what you're topically relevant towards. Or worst case scenarios, it's very costly. Back in 2005, Google confused United Airlines with Continental Airlines. Branded queries for United ended up returning results for Continental. This became highly problematic, and the marketing team probably felt the brunt of it. So Google keeps making updates so it can have a better understanding of content, the content being pushed out by sites, but also the relevancy for those sites to be connected to search queries. And at MP Digital, we say there's only three things that are sure in life: Google updates. In the last few years, each year, there's been more and more Google updates on a daily basis, trying to make sure they can understand the content that is being placed out to be able to return them as qualified results for users. Now, while the 2022 information hasn't been pushed back by Google, we can be assured that it is following the same trend line, that there's more and more updates happening consistently. But it's not just those daily updates. It's the massive core algorithm updates that we see happen throughout the year, where all the SEOs freak out on Twitter and on LinkedIn, where it has huge search volatility. And in this last year, most of the updates could be put into four categories: the product review update, the core algorithm updates, helpful content updates, and spam updates. Now, two of those move the most amount of SERP volatility and SERP fluctuations. And that's the core and the helpful content updates. And these ones are really focused on content, making sure that Google can understand the content databases that you're creating, how the content gives you topical relevance towards queries. And what we found through monitoring our own database, we have a large database of websites that we track and consistently monitor the performance to understand how they're performing, but also understand the patterns after Google makes a Google up, change their algorithm update. And that's sites with limited content creation had limited growth and even a decline in growth through a lot of these updates. Well, sites focused on content creation, building topical relevance, refreshing older content, creating new pieces, we're able to see benefits from each of these big updates. Because the goals are still the same as it always has been. Google's looking to reward content because content is king, but in Google's eyes, it's helpful content is king. But that's the way it always has been. Google is just getting better at determining what is helpful content. And a big part of that came back from 2018 when the Google did a medic update. Now, by name, it sounds like it was just managed for the medical industry, but it wasn't. It was focused on the Your Money or Life sites. As a refresher, that's anything that targeted or impacted a user's financial, medical, mental, physical well-being, but it also impacted all of search. If you've ever seen SEOs freak out about an algorithm update, this is the time they were freaking out the most because there was so much SERP volatility. Because Google was changing the way it looked at individual results. Because no longer was Google ranking things in isolation, it was ranking individual pieces of content, context of the content behind them content pieces. And what this means is, if we took an example from artificial intelligence copywriting, something that Neil ranks number 1 for, you'll find an individual article. But this article isn't all that is being ranked. Is all that is being taken into consideration as the result. At this time, Google introduced EAT. Now this is branched out to EEAT, but the original EAT was expertise, authority, and trust. Google was trying to figure out how could they instill authority and expertise into an individual article piece and understand it as a trustworthy result. mainly because at the time users were starting to disconnect from search, finding that a lot of the results were noisy. There weren't good results coming in. So to counteract this, Google expanded what they were looking at for individual rankings. So when you find this individual piece, while you interact with this individual article as a result, what Google has taken into context is all the other articles created around that are topically relevant. All the other articles that are written around content creation and copywriting, all the other articles that are written around AI generation and utilizing them in your marketing campaigns. This content universe is what is being ranked, even though we only see the individual article surpassing others. So it is the individual article within the content universe that is outranking the other content universes on the search result page. So this is why it's been a major focus for us as an agency in the past few years to go really deep with the content, building out these content universes around your core competencies, making sure we take your product, service, or solution pages and building out relevant topical context through different articles and through different URLs to make sure that you're covering all these pieces of information. So Google understands that you're an expert and authority in the space to trust you as a result for your transactional queries. And we do this through content focused on both the bottom of the funnel, those transactional pieces, guiding users to make an informed decision, but as well as the more broad terms as users are entering their purchase journey and making sure that we're expanding our content universes to cover everything, even these long tail queries. Google reaffirmed that 15% of searches are new, never been searched before. So we need to extend our content universes to account for making sure that we are as visible as possible. And if you notice that this image is actually just a different perspective on the classic funneling, because nurturing a user down the funnel helps us really ensure that we're taking care of them, both in the eyes of brand awareness for the user, but for Google to trust us as an expert and authority on the space. This image in front of you is how we've seen a lot of success in the past few years, is building these relevant pieces around individual targeted articles and keywords. And that's how you need to plan your content, is basing it off of how relevant is it to your core competencies? Are we covering the information that is needed that expresses that topical relevance? How in demand is this information? Are we covering what users in the space need to know and want to know? Utilizing things like monthly search volume and the connection towards our core competencies to dictate what is in demand in this space, but also intent. And intent, not just saying we're looking to serve in transactional intents to make business, but intent to make sure that we're serving individual intents. And that's what we're satisfying for these search queries, because there isn't much keyword cannibalization. It's intense cannibalization. We want to make sure that we're making individual articles satisfied in all the different intents being served in the space. And then we want to create a lot of evergreen content. So content that is going to be in demand year round to really build our authority, build the foundational basis of our authority before moving on to temporal content, focusing on the different seasonal content that's in the space. And one thing I always have to point out is with seasonal content, we want to make sure that it's done well in advance to the seasonality. And that's to have it prepared, maturing on the site, building into your other campaigns, ready to launch with different social campaigns and different off-site activities, but as well as integrating that content into your site. So not just placing it on top, not just releasing a new piece of content that's important for a seasonal aspect, but integrate it into your garden of content. I've always really liked the analogy that your content database is a garden, because just making a couple pieces isn't a garden. It's just a few flowers. We want to make sure that we're maturing, watering, and nourishing this content so it grows into something that's worth visiting. Integrating it in, placing it in there. So building internal links into past created historical pieces to make sure that it's part of the garden, not just flowers being placed on top. Where this analogy goes the strongest is that if you're taking care of a garden, you have to maintain the garden, and pruning becomes a big aspect of that. Not just adding content, but going back and revising the content you've created in your database. Here at NFT Digital, we have an exercise that we do consistently throughout the campaigns with our partners and clients. We call it 6R. And the big focus is auditing our content database to ensure that it is still relevant and it is working through efficiently. And to do this, we look at to reformat and repurpose historical content, see if we can add rich media, evolve as the web is evolving, making sure that this is engageable content, but also refreshing content, making sure that the information that we're presenting is up to date and that everything is search in our space and our industry evolves, so does our content. Looking to split out individual articles into multiple pieces that better serve the intent of the questions and information being looked for, or consolidating information in articles to make stronger pieces. This also comes in terms of redirecting content. You'll find that historically you create a lot of content, some of it ends up being duplicated. The intent is satisfied through older pieces or newer pieces and redirecting them together so that we're not diluting ourselves. And then one thing that's also really important is retiring some content. Through past digital campaigns, you might find that there is a bit of entity dilution, which I had referenced earlier, in that you've created articles that are no longer relevant to the aboutness of your core competencies, your core products. And we can remove those from the site. And lastly, remain, as in what deserves to stay on the site. And when we're looking at that, now that we have a content strategy put in place, is how can we make more efficient of our resources that we have? AI generation is one of the biggest parts of that, in that the barrier to content creation is as low as ever. ChatGPT changed the game and how easy it is to create content. Animals put out a piece a few years ago talking about the future of AI generated content, in that big technical revolutions to the creation of any type of content, starting with writing the printing press. Each iteration of these technological advances has created an exponential increase in the amount of volume of content being put out there. But for the first time with AI generated content, we've decoupled the effort and the output, making it possible to create content with a click of a button. And that's huge. But that also means the web is becoming very saturated with content. Just looking at to learn more about marketing, there's over 8 billion results in about half of a second being returned. So if you were to compete in that space, it's 8 billion results that you're competing with. How do you cut through the noise? Especially as a lot of this AI generated content is very repetitive. Now, some of you on this call that have experimented with ChatGPT know that not only making articles of similarity have put very redundant pieces of information out there, but even in this singular article, ChatGPT can be very redundant with his answers. And it becomes very important the prompts that you're feeding into it to give a bit of uniqueness. But it's not just that, because if everyone's using the same tools to create the same output, you're going to see a lot of repetitive content, a lot of duplicative content. That's something Google has really pushed against, that the quality of the output is what they want to focus on. So automatically generate content that's focused on search results, manipulating search results, getting rankings, that's against the guidelines. What's not against the guidelines is utilizing AI generated content as long as there's a valuable output. And that's what they're really focused on. Remember that the user is Google's consumer. They don't care about your site. They just utilize your site to provide answers and to satisfy the intent of the queries that users are looking for. So with this in mind, we can then realize how ChatGPT can help us the most. On a scale of just doing the work for us to brainstorming, if somewhere lies in the middle is where the most power is. Well, we can utilize it to brainstorm new ideas, to help us create the outlines of which we're putting into our prompts. Drafting the content is really where most the power is, because the power is in the rewrite. When we look to make great content, we look at great content creators. And one of the best of all time is John Swartzwelder. He was one of the lead writers in The Simpsons during the golden era. He wrote more episodes than anyone. He's credited with the most amount of jokes. Some of the jokes are called Swartzweldian, as jokes that are new, but they sound like they've been around forever. And then one of the rare interviews done with him, the New Yorker asked, "What is your process in creating so many legendary pieces of comedic television?" And his answer is something that's so relevant to our digital campaigns, and is that writing is really hard, but rewriting is comparatively easy. And utilizing the same theory, we can utilize a lot of how we spend our resources. Creating new content is resource intensive, the time and cost that it takes to go into it. But utilizing ChatGPT, we can at least give ourselves a first draft of which we can build off of, reducing the costs and the resources spent for each individual piece, making our teams more efficient, so they can spend more time infusing that content, making it more unique by looking at personifying it with our brand voice, so that pieces of articles that we're creating seem more relevant to our user base, but they stand out within all the saturation of the web. But also then spending their time on making that content more unique, providing new info. Remember, most times the people are creating content, they're just looking at all the content that has been creating, summarizing. ChatGPT does that to an extent. So it's just an amalgamation of all the content it has access to. What it doesn't have access to is the individual information you have, your teams have, with the data that you're storing on your side. Bill Slawski broke down a couple of patterns that were focused on information gain and information gain scores. And the summary of it is information that is new to a space and included in articles gives it a higher information gain score possibly giving it a higher ranking because you're bringing some new conversation while also summarizing the conversation of other articles and other information out there. And this is really important how a lot of massive sites have seen huge success in the past is leveraging the proprietary data. Glassdoor has been the best of these because the time they take for that proprietary data has also allowed them to have massive offsite benefits, building a huge external linking backlink profile. What they've done is they take articles that are pretty easy to generate, but they infuse it with the data that they have. And you don't need user generated content to be able to make something as equal as powerful. You can utilize the consumer insights, the industry insights, the information you have, which is your own users, to create data that is easily distinguishable. It's unique. More importantly, it's easy to be picked up by journalists and publishers because when you can create data sources or statistics and citations, they're likely to reference you and give you that backlink. So utilizing your resources here rather than the creation of content, but also distributing your resources to focus on how do we make this content convert? Because we don't want to just create articles. It's great to have a big content body and build that visibility up in search, but we also want our informational pieces to leverage towards our business KPIs. Now, it is as simple as adding CTAs to your content, but as simple as it's saying that, a lot of websites do that wrong because it's not just putting a sticky side rail onto our articles or including a CTA button at the bottom. It's how do we present our CTAs? We need to make them engaging. We also need to make them customized to our audience, but customized to our audience where they are in the funnel. Different pieces of content as we created in our content universe presented earlier are at different places of the funnel. As Google expressed through their paper through the messy middle, your audiences have unique touch points. And even the different segments of your audience have unique touch points to themselves. We have to make sure that when we're creating CTAs through these pieces of articles and information, that we're customizing the CTAs not only to the area, the stage of the funnel they're at, but to their persona as well. That's why it's so important to understand your audience, creating not only information that we're targeting towards these users, but the way that they're going to engage with our conversation or conversional transactional points. And this is where we can take it a step further. Not just using the imagery on the CTAs, but making sure that we're using good imagery on our articles. Since ChatGPT is taking the lift of creation, we need to make sure that we're distancing ourselves from the classic black text on white pages. The web has evolved far past that. People need something to be interactive, engaged with. So visual information is so important because we as humans connect with visual information. It sticks with us. But it's also far more engaging, reduces article fatigue. You've seen so many articles, and we're all guilty of it. We go onto a page, we're looking for information. We have one hero image and just this huge wall of text. We get bored, we get overwhelmed. We end up leaving and going to a new result. So imagery allows us to get more engagement not only on our articles, but also keeps up with the evolution of the web because users are looking and using search for more than just text. They're looking to engage with video and images and see infographics. And as such, search has evolved with it, becoming more visual. So users have this expectation that when they look onto one of your pages, they'll have a more visual experience. So we can utilize imagery to get engagement, but also slide in CTAs, creating new native ads or CTA banners, in which we can pair with some of the imagery we're doing, more likely than not to be blinded by users. Because users are getting very good at ignoring a lot of ads without ad block because they're so used to being advertised. So when we can connect CTAs to images, we're more likely to be seen, to be visible, more likely to convert, but also then making our CTAs pair with our imagery that we use around the site. So they're more likely to be seen by our users. But also adding rich content allows us to convert in other ways. It allows us to be more engaging. We did an experiment with one of our partners, SoFi, over the US, focusing on adding videos to informational content. What we found was that the average session duration increased for every article we added video for, but also the depth of engagement increased, and that users were more likely to go onto more pages and extend their search and interact with the CTAs we had on the page. And that's why it's so important to, in the world of conversion, test, continuously test. This is something Google does really, really well, is they're continuously testing even small aspects of their site. And this is what you can do when you free up the resources from content creation, is put those resources into testing, continuously testing, nurturing a culture of testing within your organization. Which, just to bring it all around, the summary of this, if you could take anything from what I've just been talking about, is Google is ranking more than the individual results that you're engaging with or you're seeing for any query that you type in. It is the content universes that we create around these individual articles that are competing with our competitors, being seen and showing as top ranking results. AI is not going to kill search. As these hyperbolic podcasts and articles have come out, but what we can do is utilize it to create very efficient content strategies and free up resources and reduce our costs so we can spend them elsewhere, strengthen our digital campaigns, and move those resources into making sure that the content we're creating is converting and really pushing towards the bottom of your business KPI. I thank you. I appreciate you all listening to that.
Luke, that was class. Yeah, really, really, really interesting stuff there. And anything that gets a Simpsons reference in my book has my vote for sure. We've got a few minutes for questions, so there's quite a few people on the call. If anyone does have any questions, it'd be great to perhaps raise your hand. And we've got a couple of minutes, as I say, to ask away. I will ask one whilst people are umming and ahhing, just so they don't feel like they have to be the first one. And this is quite a selfish one, but I'm really interested. How are you using ChatGPT sort of in your sort of day to day, like in the data role, either you or sort of the agency itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have two branches that we're utilizing ChatGPT for. One is the work that we're doing on a per client basis. So helping us with one brainstorm, it's helping us and the clients take a lift off the content being created. But also we have the second avenue, and that we own a few software applications. So you're probably familiar with Uber Suggest, and we acquired Answer the Public. We've been utilizing ChatGPT and integrating into our systems to create more avenues for our users through those software to be able to create better pieces of content. And utilizing that then in congruency with our teams to be able to create first-in-class pages and URLs to really target the intent that users are looking for the information that they're searching.
Nice. Yeah, that's really, really useful stuff. And there's no hands. I'm going to ask one more, and then we'll kind of wrap up there. So what should, I know you covered it within the presentation sort of like briefly, but what should content creators be aware of when using sort of ChatGPT to create content?
Yeah, one of the big things is the redundancy. Right? So don't be too reliant on it. It's so great that it can produce full articles for you, but don't just take that and run with it. What you have to do is create on that, make it more unique, personify it, add your branding to it. But also, when you're creating these articles, one of the big things is integrate it into your current systems. So I mentioned it a bit about in the garden analogy. Don't just have these pieces of content, put them on top of your content database, go back, create internal links, establish this into your network of content so that you have one big web rather than a stack.
No, that's really useful. We have actually one question from Paul Gray as well. I think I can see another hand just gone up, but question from Paul is: will chat AI become likely to be quite toxic in the future if all using it? There's no difference between anyone.
Well, definitely, I think repetition is a huge concern. Even right now, not even waiting a year from now, repetition is a massive concern. And that's why it's so important just to use it for the drafting process. Use it to give you that first draft that you can make the iterations on, have your team just work off and free the resources of content creation. Because as I said, even in individual articles, it can be quite redundant in its answers and its creation of an individual piece while answering a question.
So basically, don't be lazy. Use it to kind of do some of the heavy lifting, but always add the human element.
Exactly that. And I think, Mikey, you struck it right there. Don't be lazy.
As much as we all would love to be, but yeah. And then time for one more. Then Isabel, sorry, I can see you got your hand up. If you could, unmute. And if
hiya. So my question is: so we work in the medical industry, and in terms of like refreshing content, obviously, with medical, the facts are the facts. And so refreshing the content is kind of what we find tricky. And I wondered if that was something you'd come across before and how you sort of tackled that.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's the same in the financial. I've done a lot of work in the financial, I've been in the medical. And a big thing with that, and that's what Healthline does, is expand on that. So you do have the facts of the facts, but you need to expand and give more context. And a lot of the ways they can do this, one of the biggest secrets that's still heavily underutilized, FAQ content. So bringing in questions that are related to the facts that you're really pushing through for an article, adding this additional copy and context at the bottom of your pages, but then marking it up with FAQ schema. So there's things that maybe a lot of your competitors aren't doing. This will allow you to unlock the rich attributes of FAQ results on the SERP results, extending the real estate you have per result, increasing the amount you take up on the search result pages, which is a phenomenal way to really stand out in your competitor set.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks all. And yeah, Luke, thanks very much. That was fantastic. Really, really useful stuff.
Thank